Hello, this is Joseph Evaldi, and this is the Joseph Evaldi Podcast. We stand tall despite defeat. On tonight's podcast, we're going to have a few clips from A Soul Warrior's Journey, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. I recently, in the beginning of the year, tried to do the audiobook and play it, but this has narration to it, and it will be an audiobook. And it is going to be narrated by Andrew Garrett, which I'm happy to play the first two clips. And in between the clips, I will discuss a little bit about what I went through in the process and what I thought with the chapters. So without further ado, let's get to the book. Audiobook. Clips.
Chapter 1. It was the summer of 2002 when Joseph's turmoil escalated. Joseph at the time was a young 18-year-old. He had short black hair, blue eyes, and was a slender 5'6". He read some self-help books to help him deal with his depression. He understood all these concepts, but didn't know how to apply them to his life. As a result, his social and romantic life was in a mess. He was shy when it came to women, and he would stumble on his words when he was speaking with the opposite sex. Only thing good in his life was his school education. He enjoyed watching wrestling and would order WWE pay-per-views in which his friends, Shawn Williams and Paul Franks, came over to keep him company. Shawn at that time was his best friend. He would be there for him when he needed it, and he liked the loyalty that Joseph and others showed him. Shawn would have a hot temper towards any disloyalty to him. To Paul Franks, Joseph was there to joke around with. He called him a fool at times for some of the things he did. Altogether, Joseph was a good friend to have around for Paul. That summer, Paul and Shawn were constantly competing with each other with their wrestling video games. Joseph always lost. Shawn and Paul always tried to outdo one another. They all enjoyed the competition. Joseph's problems only began when Shawn and Paul brought around their new friend, Emily Dickens. She was a young 19-year-old woman with her life ahead of her. She liked to travel many times to see her favorite musician, Sting, play. She had the sparkling personality that Joseph automatically fell for her. She was 5'4" and had curly brown hair and brown eyes. Her family background was from England. A gaze into her eyes would make any man go wild, and for Joseph, it only drove him crazy. Joseph was starting to wake up out of his confidence problem immediately when he met her. That summer, he wanted to be with her, but at the same time, he couldn't make his intentions known. Joseph never trusted his friends when it came to telling them who he liked and whom he was going to go after romantically. However, the guys always had a pact to say who they were going for, so there would be no problems. Joseph was a little slow to this rule, and he felt the frustration along the way. All the women had turned Joseph down before in the past, but not in the matter of how Joseph was hurt. Emily had no idea how she hurt him. Joseph thought he was starting to hit it off with Emily. They were talking and flirting with each other. This lasted for 2 weeks. Joseph was slow with relationships and missed all the signs and didn't know how to act when his friends were around, but he came out of his shell when she was around. Emily took this flirting of his and treated him as a friend. It was only until Derek Nylander entered the picture. Derek had a sense of humor for an 18-year-old. He had short blonde hair and a medium build to him. He knew the right words to say to make the women fall for him and do whatever he pleased. It took one night to flirt with Emily, and Emily's attention went toward Derek Nylander. Joseph once again was pushed out of the picture. He became angry and jealous. This time it affected him more than the others. He wanted this one bad, and he put his heart into it. As a result, Joseph was about to fall harder than anyone he knew fell before. Joseph let these emotions settle in him. He had anger and resentment, but he didn't know how to release his anger properly. Joseph lost his chance to be with Emily. He questioned himself that summer and felt depression overcome him. He felt this way for a few months, and then just when his life couldn't get any worse, his life would change. This happened when there was a party involving alcohol with his friends on December 15th of that year. Joseph, down on his luck, felt he had one last opportunity with Emily, and this came at a hotel drinking party that Sean and Paul were going to have. They invited Emily and two friends of hers, Jen and Janet. The party went well in the beginning for Joseph. He was turning on his sense of humor, and he impressed them. He even was ready to go into the hot tub with them. The women didn't mind if he saw them undress. Things were going well with Joseph. He was the center of attention that night. However, Sean and Paul didn't tell Joseph that they invited his arch-rival, Derek Nylander. His friends thought that Joseph had gotten over what he had done and had moved on. But deep down inside, Joseph had not forgotten or even forgiven him. Joseph's reaction was about to turn from laughter to anger. He was filled with jealousy and animosity when he walked in. His mood changed in 1 minute. Joseph had one drink out of anger, and that did it. All his friends saw his wrath, and his anger showed. He cursed off all his friends. He told Emily how he felt, and he kept rambling on about how he was mistreated. His friend Sean wanted no part of him, as Joseph was causing trouble. Joseph would never be the same again. His anger got the best of him, and his mind became ill. The next day, he woke up, and he had to go to J.P. Nichols for work, and his perception of life was altered. He was interpreting life to the point where his delusions took over. He was hearing things on the TV and believing it. He started to color coordinate everything in his room, and if anyone got in his way, he would curse them out. He finally, in a bit of rage, had cursed off his parents, and they had no choice but to call 911. His parents knew something was wrong and had to act. To Joseph, this was an act of betrayal, and he was taken away in the ambulance. When he was in the room, he couldn't move, because the nurses violently assaulted him when he tried to escape the room. They sealed him off because he was a threat. This was the start of his never-ending problems. He was then shipped to New York State Hospital for a mental health examination. The hospital was merciless with his treatment. They treated him as if he was seriously mentally ill and gave him heavy medication. He was not the same afterwards. Joseph lost the feeling to feel certain emotions. He lost the ability to speak intellectually, and he was in a zombie-like state when he was with his friends. He relived the same event of the party in his head over and over again, and he kept on talking about how horrible his medications were and what they did to him. He slowly recovered and got his speech back, and also some of his emotions came back. When his speech came back, he had to learn everything over again. He questioned his existence. The turning point in his life would come 5 years later.
That was Chapter 1 of A Soul Warrior's Journey, narrated by Andrew Garrett. And let me give you a little bit of what I went through when I was writing that. Because similar experience happened roughly around this time about 18 years ago. And I too had a party to go to at a hotel, and I did like a woman back then, which I won't mention her name, but let's just say I thought things were going in my direction. And then fate intervened. Face from the past came back, intervened, my mindset sank, and afterwards I collapsed. That is what I went through many years ago, but it was only the birth of something. At that time when I went through that, I didn't know what direction my life would enter into, because being on the medication turned me into a zombie. Because if anyone knows history at the time, they were over-medicating the person. It's only until recently they had the right dosage and they're working on fixing it. But if it was 2000, people in the system were guinea pigs. And the orderlies there still treat the person that way. Now, I'm not going to mention where or what or who, but all I know is significance for me to put this opener in the book. Because when I mentioned the color coordinating, it's the whole idea of the chakra system. Now, regardless of your belief, some disagree with this, some don't, some it is what it is, but it ties into the path that my character Joseph Woods is going to take. And his life's a mess. He's working. Things aren't going right. He's got a gambling addiction, sex addiction, and then he bumps into this man, Matthias Anderson. Without further ado, here is chapter 2.
Chapter 2. The Meeting. One day, Joseph Woods was leaving his 5 p.m. shift from J.P. Nichols, and he was in a hurry to go on to one of his gambling escapades, until he accidentally knocks over Matthias Anderson. Matthias is from Sweden, and he's an acupuncture specialist. He also travels to many parts of the world, including Egypt, looking for spiritual answers to life. Joseph's life was going to change because of this meeting with Matthias. Matthias responded to Joseph after he was knocked over. "Where are you going?" Joseph said, "I don't know. Home, I guess." Matthias, with a discerned look on his face, said, "In life, we always go somewhere, even if we don't know what life is all about. We move on and are guided every day, even if we are unaware of the signs. However, the signs are everywhere." Joseph stood there for a minute, and he was pondering this question to life. Was there more to life than he has been living? Was there a grander purpose to life?